Imagine waking up and realizing most of your thoughts aren't yours. They were planted to keep you obedient, distracted, and predictable. That's how control works, not through force, but through confusion. Because a mind that can't see clearly can be led anywhere. 5 centuries ago, Niccolò Machiavelli saw through that fog. The political strategist who advised princes and wrote The Prince understood one thing most still don't: power belongs to those who can think without illusion. This video will show you how to do the same, how to cut through noise, emotion, and manipulation, so your mind becomes your strongest weapon. The problem isn't that people don't think, it's that they think in the wrong order. Emotion strikes first, reason limps after. Anger precedes logic. Anxiety invents threats. Attraction creates illusions. When feeling leads, judgment follows blind. Machiavelli reversed that order. He began not with emotion, but with outcome. What serves the goal? What must be protected? What must be avoided? Emotion came last, restrained, useful, subordinate. Rule 1: separate the useful from the merely true. Truth without function weakens power. Decisions aren't about reality, they're about results. Machiavelli prized perception over purity because people react to belief, not fact. Clarity begins where certainty ends. The question isn't is it true, but where does it lead? Modern minds drown not in lies, but in overload, too much input, too little sovereignty. Information and outrage breed dependency. Each borrowed voice dulls the inner one until ambition itself becomes imitation. Rule 2: filter ruthlessly, reflect selectively. Before absorbing, ask, does the source risk anything? Will this alter my next move? If not, discard it. Clear minds need sharper filters, not fuller storage. Then perception refines. Most confuse options with opportunities, chasing availability instead of alignment. The world brims with traps disguised as choices: safe jobs that tame hunger, comfort that erodes will, distractions that sedate clarity. Hesitation hides behind virtue. Society calls fear open-mindedness. But neutrality, Machiavelli knew, is fear posing as wisdom. Power demands choice before comfort. Clarity forms through motion, friction, correction. Rule 3: clarity is iterative. Those who wait to be sure are devoured by those who act, then adapt. Machiavelli wasn't flawless, he was fearless. That made him dangerous. Even sharp minds fracture under urgency. False deadlines dissolve judgment. Decide now. Sign fast. Urgency is manipulation masquerading as importance. Machiavelli warned, create it for others, never obey it. Antidote: delay reflex. When rushed, pause and ask, who profits if I move fast? If speed is their weapon, delay is your shield. Clarity isn't defense, it's design. Machiavelli's hidden art was mental contrast, judging plans not by gain, but by loss you can survive. Average minds chase reward, strategic minds measure endurance. If it fails, can I recover? That's not fear, it's foresight. The world glorifies risk-takers, but the real predators are calculators. They move not for applause, but for longevity. Machiavelli studied loss more than triumph, because clarity isn't perfection, it's survival. And survival demands honesty, the kind that cuts through vanity. Comfort feels moral, but it's sedation. Choices that look noble yet weaken position aren't virtue, they're surrender. Ask, does this protect strength or feed ego? Because weakness often parades as virtue, and self-preservation is condemned as sin. Each time approval outweighs power, clarity decays. But it can be rebuilt, not emotionally, but structurally. Machiavelli would start with mental architecture, Clarity dies not from ignorance, but from noise, engineered, addictive noise that collapses focus and turns the fortress of thought into an open gate. Ideas slip in untested, distractions settle uninvited, and the self dissolves into reaction. He'd call it mental exposure. No strategist fights unshielded. Defense begins by eliminating saboteurs, habits that bleed attention before thought forms. The worst is constant switching, the modern plague. Jumping from feed to feed until focus fractures and thought loses weight. Multitasking isn't mastery, it's erosion. Fragmented minds don't plan, they react. That's why powerful thinkers guard not just time, but state, the throne room of clarity. No commander plots war in a marketplace, yet most make life choices amid noise and emotion. Machiavelli would mock the ritual of scrolling for purpose. Clarity isn't motion, it's stillness by design. In silence, static dies, signal returns, and values realign. From that silence begins sovereignty, thinking born of alignment, not imitation. But silence only clears the ground. Building starts with one ruthless question: what is this mind optimizing for? Without a central aim, thought fractures, peace today, power tomorrow, approval next. The mind calls it civil war open-mindedness. But clarity demands hierarchy. 10 goals divide, 1 unites. Machiavelli didn't dream of perfection, he mastered terrain. Clarity grows from reality, not fantasy. So ask, is this decision built on real leverage or imagined power? Most errors come not from logic, but illusion, too much time, loyalty, or control. When illusion collapses, confusion follows. Self-delusion is clarity's first assassin. The mind guards its own lies, glorifying effort, confusing emotion with evidence. Comforting stories turn to traps. Real clarity requires self-disillusionment, stripping narrative until only fact remains. Then decisions stop reacting, they start executing. Once stripped and silent, the mind gains what others call instinct, but it's just unclouded logic. Patterns appear. Leverage becomes visible. Choices shift from right or wrong to strong or weak. Here Machiavelli's higher method begins, reversal simulation. He didn't ask, what if I act, but what if I don't? What the case if I wait, stay silent, forgive? The deadliest losses come from an action disguised as patience. Power leaks through hesitation, not mistakes. When paralyzed, rewind. Ask, what rots while I wait? What power fades while I think? Those answers cut deeper than analysis. Clarity lives in that silence, cold, exact, indestructible. Then clarity evolves into foresight. Once emotion quiets, patterns in others emerge. People, Machiavelli saw, moved by fear, pride, and the need to appear strong. Read those drives, and their next move appears before they make it. So the question isn't what do I want? But what do they fear I might do? Average minds seek advantage, Machiavellian minds seek leverage through anticipation. Awareness alone shifts control. Thinking through fear makes influence invisible. This isn't cruelty, it's clarity weaponized. When you forecast accurately, nothing surprises you. Betrayal, lies, manipulation, all expected, contained, and used. You stop reacting, you start orchestrating. But mastery costs solitude. The sharper your mind, the fewer peers remain. You'll see what others miss, pause when they rush, detach when they cling. They'll call it arrogance, it's wakefulness in a world still dreaming. That is the final price, and the proof, of clarity. Refuse it, and the mind betrays itself, softening truth for approval, dulling insight to belong, shrinking to stay accepted. Yet as Machiavelli warned, better misunderstood with power than understood and powerless. Clarity demands a choice, accuracy or agreement. They rarely coexist. As perception sharpens, movement quiets. The clearer the mind, the smaller the gesture. You stop explaining, defending, announcing. You wait, patient, exact, inevitable. That's silent power. The most dangerous thinkers are quiet, not for lack of words, but because they measure which ones deserve to be spoken. Here begins Machiavelli's final discipline, mental layering. Holding multiple truths at once, what's happening, how it appears, how it's misread, and how reactions will echo. Not thought, strategy. Take criticism. Average minds defend, layered minds diagnose. Why now? Who benefits? What signal does silence send? They pick the move that looks weak today but dominates tomorrow. That's the Machiavellian edge, not winning moments, but momentum. But clarity requires ego's death. A mind addicted to validation can't see straight. Every correction feels like threat, pride bends logic, identity fuses with outcome. Machiavelli avoided this trap. His worth wasn't tied to victory. He could pivot, retreat, or betray, not from weakness, but detachment. His ego wasn't on the board, only his moves. That's timeless clarity, to adapt without breaking, to correct without shame. Most would rather lose being right than win by adjusting, vanity disguised as virtue. Real clarity is efficiency under pressure. It doesn't promise perfection, it promises precision. Awareness itself becomes power. From that foundation arises his rarest skill, perspective reversal. Not empathy, but strategy, thinking like the one who profits from your failure. Ask, if someone wanted me to lose, what would they want me to do right now? That single question exposes manipulation, flattery, and urgency. The offer that flatters, the opportunity that demands haste, through that lens, every trap becomes visible. This is the Machiavellian gift, clarity from both sides of the game. To see through the predator's eyes, to understand the puppet master's hand. Once you can trace how others want you to think, you're no longer inside their plan, you're outside it. That's mental freedom, self-authored, not engineered. But freedom demands confrontation. Clear thought isn't soothing, it's surgical. It cuts through illusion, and those who flinch from discomfort return to delusion. Those who face it, ascend. Sharpen the blade with questions. Am I doing this because it's smart or because it's easy? Am I protecting my future or my image? Who profits if I hesitate? What truth am I avoiding? What would someone sharper see that I don't? Discomfort is the signal of growth. Each unease sharpens the mind. When you stop running, emotion loses command, anger shows its bait, desire its trap, fear its architect. That's why Machiavelli studied not only virtues, but vices. Not from cynicism, but survival. Misread greed, and you'll be used. Misread cowardice, and you'll mistake fear for prudence. Ignore your own deceit, and you'll believe anyone's. Clarity isn't moral, it's mechanical. It's the discipline of seeing how things operate, not how they should. Every conflict becomes data, every failure an experiment in leverage. You stop reacting and start dissecting. But even sharp minds die in one trap, clarity without movement. Thinking means nothing without execution. The world is full of brilliant paralysis, minds waiting for certainty while the bold rewrite the board. Machiavelli's genius wasn't perfection, but decisive imperfection. He acted with partial data, trusting structure over certainty. Clarity isn't knowing everything, it's knowing enough to move. When you act from that base, even failure refines you. You don't spiral, you recalibrate. You don't freeze, you evolve. True thinkers expect to be wrong and design recovery into their system. Because clarity isn't stillness, it's motion with awareness. So if you've been waiting for the perfect sign, stop. The right moment never arrives. Action creates it. Clarity isn't born from certainty, but from momentum. Direction matters more than perfection. Discipline begins the moment you move before the fog clears. To do that, the mind must be clean, stripped of noise, false urgency, and borrowed voices. Once cleared, act. Even if you err, clarity ensures recovery faster than confusion ever could. That's what Machiavelli respected, not flawlessness, but momentum under pressure. And for those seeking the final edge, audit your environment. Clarity is spatial as much as mental. A cluttered room clouds thought, chaotic people cloud judgment. Proximity shapes perception. Spend time among the unfocused, and your own sharpness dulls by contagion. Machiavelli surrounded himself with minds that provoked, not praised. He sought friction, not flattery, challengers, not comforters. Clear thought sharpens through resistance. So look closely. Who drains your stillness, rushes your process, thrives on your confusion? That's the noise to exile. Clarity needs altitude, space, stillness, elevation. Rise above the noise, and everything shifts. Advice loses influence. Fear dissolves. The need to justify dies. You stop predicting outcomes and start trusting orientation. Slowly, you become the rarest kind of person, one whose choices need no defense, because they were never made to please. They were made to win. But Machiavelli's highest discipline went further, the integration of chaos. Most divide life into good to keep and bad to forget. Machiavelli absorbed both. Betrayal, failure, humiliation, each became data. Every wound, intelligence, every setback, refinement. Pain, seen strategically, becomes information. A betrayal isn't personal, it's diagnostic. The clear mind asks, what signal did I ignore? What leverage did I misjudge? What blind spot was exploited? That's not healing, that's upgrading. When plans collapse, most retreat in guilt or blame. A Machiavellian mind dissects. Was timing off? Was ego involved? Was it necessary? Failure stops being fatal, it becomes feedback. Because confusion grows in avoidance, but clarity grows in confrontation. Steel sharpens on resistance, so does thought. Revisit every costly moment, the yes that should have been no, the trust that defied logic, the hesitation that cost advantage. Face them coldly, they'll stop haunting and start instructing. Pain becomes precision. That's how Machiavelli forged armor, not by escaping chaos, but by digesting it. Exile, betrayal, loss, all turned to foresight. He didn't flee disorder, he metabolized it into control. And once that process completes, presence changes. Words shrink. Silences gain gravity. Yes becomes rare. No becomes final. People feel the shift, not through sound, but weight. The quiet certainty of someone who no longer guesses, but knows. Because clarity doesn't just change thought, it changes presence. When choices rest on truth, even posture aligns. You don't enter rooms to prove, only to observe. You already see the board and understand the game. That's the essence of Machiavelli's philosophy, not obsession with control, but with sovereignty. Survival through self-rule. His warning remains, the man who does not govern himself will be governed by others. To think clearly is to build a mind no one can quietly command. Stop chasing emotions that paralyze. Stop hoarding advice you won't use. Stop protecting image over advantage. Be your own filter, compass, and North Star. Because the real war, the only one that matters, is won in the mind before the first move is made. When confusion rises, ask the question that clears all fog. What move protects my position without requiring me to explain myself? It won't flatter you, but it will free you. And that purity, that ruthless simplicity, is power. Because when the mind is clear, life stops being reaction and becomes design. If clarity keeps refining, if every wound becomes wisdom and every failure precision, you evolve into the kind of thinker Machiavelli feared, not loud, not impulsive, not easily provoked, but dangerous. Because when the mind moves in silence, no one sees the strike until it lands. By then, the transformation is complete. Thought no longer serves comfort, it serves vision. You stop thinking to feel better and start thinking to see further. That invisible shift, from emotion to perception, is the foundation of every powerful mind in history. Here's how it manifests. When insulted, average minds ask, "How do I defend myself?" Clear minds ask, "What reaction do they want, and what happens if I don't give it?" When uncertain, most ask, "What if I'm wrong?" Strategists ask, "Which path strengthens my position, even at a cost?" When the crowd demands, "Pick a side," a clear thinker asks, "Who profits from this division, and what advantage lies in silence?" That's Machiavellian clarity, not omniscience, but the discipline to ask the question that disables the trap. Because most traps aren't made of metal, they're made of ideas, seductive, urgent, emotionally charged. If you don't see the frame, you'll argue inside it, defending illusions, wasting energy, losing freedom inside invisible walls. Machiavelli never trusted ideas at face value. He dissected them, stripped away morality, emotion, and social virtue, and asked the question that cuts deeper than any analysis: who benefits from me believing this? That's intellectual sovereignty, seeing the power structure behind every principle. Every idea, rule, and virtue serves an architect. The question is, are you the beneficiary, or the product? When told to forgive quickly, who gains? When taught that self-interest is selfish, who profits from your guilt? When shame appears for choosing yourself, who installed it? Clear thinkers don't just test ideas, they trace them. Because once origin is exposed, you realize most beliefs are programs, not insights. They were installed by culture, family, fear, or system, and until you rewrite them, they'll think for you. That's Machiavelli's most unsettling truth: the mind is programmable, and if you don't write the code, someone else already has. So audit your thoughts. Each time you think "I should," "I can't," "I need to," pause and ask, whose voice is that? Until every foreign command is isolated and removed, you're not thinking, you're performing obedience disguised as reason. The final stage of clarity isn't sharper logic, it's ownership. When even your inner voice belongs entirely to you, the mind becomes sovereign territory, unbought, unborrowed, unbreached. Then stillness returns. You can delay without panic. Lose without collapse. Win without ego. Observe without absorbing. Move without noise. Clarity, once earned, becomes structure. Every decision starts serving design instead of emotion. You stop reacting to life, you begin constructing it. That's where real power starts, not in domination, but in composition. This is the core of Machiavelli on power as design: clarity shaped into architecture, intention refined into control. Because the strongest minds don't chase influence, they engineer it. Quietly. Precisely. By design.